The twin moons of Ryloth glowed faintly over the shattered city, but their light did little to calm the chaos below. Smoke and ash twisted in the cold wind, and jagged ruins clawed at the sky like broken teeth. Amid the ruined streets, a small figure darted between fallen buildings, her lithe legs carrying her through shadows and debris. She was young, no more than 10 by human counting, her scales a soft violet hue that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Her name was Ashalen, and she ran not out of courage, but pure fear. Screams echoed across the city as plasma fire painted everything in bright, violent streaks. The raiders had arrived suddenly, their ships cutting through the sky like hunting birds, their weapons leaving streaks of death in their wake. Ashalen had never seen such destruction before. She had lived on Ryloth all her life, a peaceful world filled with floating gardens and crystalline towers. But now, every memory of safety was being burned away. She turned a corner and froze. Before her lay a pit of molten metal, debris burning around it, and a raider ship hovering above, scanning for survivors. Her small hands shook. She wanted to run, to disappear into the darkness, but there was no way around it. Every escape route had been cut off. Tears welled in her large eyes as her chest heaved in panicked breaths. Then she heard a voice, calm, steady, almost impossibly human. "Hey, over here!" She whipped her head toward the sound and saw him, a human soldier clad in battered armor that gleamed under the burning sky. His face was scratched, smudged with soot, but his eyes were clear, focused. He held a plasma rifle, but it was lowered, as if he was saying, "I'm here to help, not to harm." Ashalen hesitated. She had heard stories about humans, how they were fearless, how they fought monsters larger than cities. She had never seen one in person, and now one stood before her offering safety. "Come on," the soldier said, extending a gloved hand. "I've got you. Don't be afraid." Her instincts screamed at her to run, to hide, but something about him made her legs obey. Maybe it was his calmness, or maybe it was the way he didn't flinch at the chaos around him. She stepped forward, and he pulled her into a protective crouch behind a fallen wall. "Stay low. We move fast," he whispered. As they darted through the streets, the soldier's movements were precise and sure. He led her through alleys filled with fire and smoke, avoiding raiders with uncanny skill. Each time a plasma bolt sizzled past them, Ashalen felt the heat on her scales and the weight of terror in her chest. Yet somehow she survived. Somehow he kept her alive. At one point they reached a collapsed bridge. The gap was wide, filled with molten rubble. Ashalen froze again. She couldn't jump that far. "Hold on to me," the soldier said. "I won't let go." Her small hands clutched his arm tightly, and together they leaped. For a terrifying moment they were airborne, suspended above the fire, and then they landed hard on the other side. Pain shot through her arms, but she didn't care. He had saved her again. Hours seemed to pass in a blur. The city was burning. The sky was red with fire, and yet he never faltered. He shielded her with his body when debris fell. He threw himself in front of plasma blasts, and he carried her when her legs faltered from exhaustion. All the while, his voice was calm, guiding her through the chaos. Finally, they reached a transport landing zone, where rescuers from the Valari resistance were waiting. Soldiers and medics rushed to the pair, pulling Ashalen from the human soldier's protective arms. She clung to him for a moment longer than necessary, unsure if she wanted to let go. "You'll be safe now," the human said softly. "Go on, you're going to be okay." Tears streaked down Ashalen's face. I'll remember you," she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both sadness and hope. "You'll be strong," he said. "Just promise me that." Before she could respond, the transport's engines roared to life and she was swept away. She looked back over her shoulder, but he was already gone, disappearing into the chaos of the burning city. Ashalen clutched the edge of the transport's door as she watched the ruins of her world fade behind her. She didn't know his name, didn't know where he came from, and didn't even know if he had survived the battle. But she remembered his voice, his calmness, his courage. And she knew somehow that he had changed her life forever. Years passed. Ryloth rebuilt slowly, and Ashalen grew into a young woman of grace and determination. But in the quiet moments when the stars were visible above her balcony, she would think of that day, of fire, fear, and the human soldier who had saved her. She would remember the way he had risked everything for her small life, the way he had never given up even when everything seemed lost. Little did she know, across the stars, he was alive. His life had continued along a path of battles, duty, and sacrifice. The memory of a small alien girl clinging to his arm in a burning city had faded, buried under years of service. Yet somewhere in the vast galaxy their paths were destined to cross again. Years had passed since the burning ruins of Ryloth. Ashalan had grown from a frightened child into a poised and intelligent young adult. Her violet scales had deepened in hue, and her eyes shone with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived impossible odds. The city she once fled had been rebuilt, towers gleaming under twin suns, gardens floating in the sky once more. Yet the memory of that day, the day a human soldier saved her life, remained vivid in her mind. Now, she walked the polished halls of the Valari High Council. Her posture straight, her voice calm but full of purpose. She had become an ambassador, representing her people in negotiations with the Terran Union, a powerful alliance of human worlds. Today she was to meet the command staff of a human military base orbiting the neutral planet Virex. It was a mission of diplomacy, of trust building, and Ashalan felt the weight of it all. The shuttle carrying her descended toward the base, a massive structure of steel and glass suspended above the planet's surface. Outside the window she could see humans moving with precision, their armor glinting in the sunlight. Ships landed and took off with disciplined efficiency. Everything about the base spoke of organization and control. Her communicator buzzed. "Ambassador Ashalan, the commanding officer of this sector is Colonel Elias Ward," the voice said. "He will greet you personally." Ashalan froze, her heart skipping a beat. Elias Ward. The name sounded impossibly familiar, like a fragment of memory half buried under years of dust. Could it be? The human who had saved her all those years ago? Her pulse quickened, a mixture of hope and disbelief flooding her senses. She quickly composed herself. Diplomatic decorum required neutrality. She could not allow personal emotions to interfere with her mission. But inside, a storm raged. The shuttle docked, and Ashalan stepped onto the platform. Guards approached, their faces stern but polite. She followed protocol, giving the proper nods and hand signals. The corridors of the base were vast, metallic, and humming with energy. Every step brought her closer to the man who might have changed her life without even knowing it. Finally, she reached the command chamber. The doors slid open, revealing a room filled with officers and holographic displays. At the center stood a man who immediately caught her attention. He was taller than she remembered, or at least taller than she thought a human child could recall. His hair was streaked with gray, and lines of experience traced his face. He wore the uniform of a seasoned colonel, decorated with insignia and commendations. But it was his eyes that stopped her. The same calm gray eyes she had looked into all those years ago. Eyes that had radiated steadiness in the midst of chaos. Ashalan's breath caught. Her heart raced, threatening to betray her composure. She reminded herself this was diplomacy. She must remain professional. The human's eyes swept across the room and landed on her. For a brief moment there was a flicker of recognition, or perhaps curiosity. He stepped forward. "Ambassador Ashalan," he said, voice firm but welcoming. "It is an honor to have you here." Her voice caught in her throat. She nodded carefully. "Thank you, Colonel Ward. The honor is mine." Something inside her stirred, a memory too powerful to ignore. She studied him closely. There was a familiarity in the way he moved, the way he held himself under pressure, the way his gaze scanned the room before settling on her. It was almost instinctive, yet he said nothing of the past. Perhaps he did not recognize her. Humans had such short memories compared to the Valari, she thought. Or perhaps he had simply buried it, like a chapter in a book he had closed long ago. The counselors and officers began formal introductions, discussing trade, joint defense initiatives, and diplomatic cooperation. Ashalan answered questions, her voice steady, but her mind kept drifting back to him. Every detail she had remembered as a child, the way he had shielded her, the calmness in his voice, the courage that had seemed impossible, now seemed alive in front of her. During a break in the session, she found herself standing near a large observation window, looking out at the sprawling human base. The hum of engines and the distant chatter of soldiers created a strange sense of calm. She didn't notice Elias approaching until he spoke softly behind her. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" he asked. She turned, startled, but her voice remained composed. "Yes, it is." For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the faint vibrations of the base. She studied him carefully, searching for a sign, any flicker of recognition, but his expression was neutral, professional, yet something in his posture suggested awareness, perhaps buried deep under years of duty. "I've heard of your work, Ambassador," he said finally. "The Valari have done remarkable things in rebuilding Ryloth. Your people have great resilience." Ashalin's chest tightened. Rebuilding Ryloth, the very city he had saved her from. She could almost hear the screams, see the fire. And here he was, standing beside her, unaware that he had been the reason she lived. I was a child then," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I survived because of a human soldier." She hesitated, unsure if she should reveal more. "I remember him." Elias's brow furrowed slightly. "A human soldier?" he repeated. "Do you mean someone from the Terran forces?" "Yes," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. "He saved me on Ryloth. I don't know if he survived." Elias's eyes widened slightly. His hand hovered near his side, and for a moment time seemed to slow. "Ryloth," he murmured. The name of the planet, the battle, the chaos, memories long buried stirred. Ashalin's pulse quickened. "Could it be? Do you remember a child?" she asked cautiously. His eyes softened, searching her face as though trying to unlock a long-forgotten memory. "A child, violet-scaled, in the middle of the firestorm?" he said slowly. I thought you didn't make it. I never even knew if anyone survived." Ashalin's throat tightened. "I did, I survived. Because of you." He looked at her, and for the first time the weight of years of duty, of battles fought and lost, seemed to fall from his shoulders. You're the little girl." His voice cracked slightly with disbelief. "All this time, I thought I had failed." "No," she said firmly, placing a hand on the window edge to steady herself. "You didn't fail. You saved me. That one act, it shaped my entire life." Elias's eyes glistened with emotions he rarely allowed himself to feel: relief, awe, pride, and a twinge of regret for the years he had thought he had lost her. I don't even remember my own heroism," he admitted quietly. I just did what I had to do. I never thought—" "You saved a life," Ashalin said softly. "But more than that, you gave me a future." They stood in silence, the enormity of the moment pressing on both of them. Around them, the base continued its hum of activity, unaware of the quiet reunion unfolding in the observation chamber. Two lives, once separated by years and light years, now connected by memory, gratitude, and destiny. As the council resumed their discussions, Ashalin found herself glancing at him repeatedly. The man who had saved her was no longer just a figure from memory. He was real, present. And perhaps for the first time in years she did not feel afraid. Across the room, Elias studied her with quiet intensity, as though trying to memorize every detail. The fire and fear of Ryloth had faded, replaced by a different kind of heat, one born of recognition, of connection, and of the unspoken promise that some bonds, once forged, could never be broken. The shuttle trip, the city, the fire, the chaos, it all seemed like a distant memory now. But standing here, looking at the human who had risked everything for her, Ashalin knew that the past was not lost. It was alive, and it had found her. The first step of their new journey together had begun, and neither of them could yet know how far it would take them. Across stars, through political intrigue, and into dangers neither had ever faced before. But one thing was certain: the human soldier who had saved a little alien girl years ago was still a hero. Not because of medals or missions, but because he had acted with courage and compassion when it mattered most. The Valari human peace talks had resumed under the gleaming arches of the Virex orbital station. Holographic displays flickered, projecting star maps and trade routes while counselors from both sides debated in measured tones. On the surface, everything seemed orderly, calm, professional. But beneath the diplomacy, tension simmered, both political and personal. Ashalin felt it like a low hum in her chest. She had spent years preparing for negotiations like this, but no amount of training could steady the rush of emotion she experienced when she saw Elias Ward move through the chamber. He had returned to his calm, commanding presence as if nothing had happened, a human soldier through and through. But she knew better. She had seen the courage behind those eyes once in the fire of Ryloth, and she knew that same bravery had never left him. As the discussions progressed, an alarm blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed and the hum of machinery shifted to a warning siren. Counselors froze. Officers snapped to attention. "Attention all personnel," Elias's voice rang out, steady and commanding. "We have a security breach in Sector 7. All civilians move to safe zones. Defense teams mobilize." Ashelin's heart sank. She knew the vulnerability of space stations, even heavily defended ones like Virex. If intruders had made it this far, chaos would follow. She glanced around, seeing counselors and diplomats scrambling in fear. The sirens reminded her painfully of Ryloth. Fire, panic, confusion. Memories she had buried threatened to resurface. "Stay behind me," Elias said, his voice low but firm. Without hesitation, he stepped in front of her, scanning the corridors as they moved toward a secure exit. Ashelin felt her pulse racing, but she didn't hesitate. Something about his presence calmed her, a reminder that she was not alone, just as he had done years ago. Yet the tension in the station was undeniable. Red warning lights reflected off the walls, casting shadows that seemed to leap and twist like living things. As they rounded a corner, a sudden blast rocked the corridor. Panels sparked and shards of metal fell toward them. Without thinking, Elias threw his body over hers, absorbing the impact. Pain shot through her arm as she slammed into the wall, but she was alive. He turned to her, his expression hidden under the helmet's visor. "Are you okay?" he asked. Yes," she stammered, wincing as she pushed herself upright. "Good. Keep close," he said, scanning the area. "We need to reach the control room. It's the fastest way to secure the station." The corridor narrowed, forcing them into single file. Footsteps echoed behind them, sharp and calculated. Ashelin's eyes widened as she recognized the intruders. Rogue mercenaries equipped with advanced suits and weapons. They were fast, coordinated, and clearly well-trained. Yet Elias moved with ease, anticipating their movements, his body a shield and weapon in one. One mercenary lunged from a side door, plasma pistol raised. Elias reacted instantly, blocking the attack with his forearm, sending the intruder stumbling back. Ashelin ducked instinctively, watching the human who had once saved her become a whirlwind of precision and courage. Every movement was calculated, every decision deliberate. "Follow me," he shouted, sprinting down a stairwell as the mercenaries pursued. Ashelin's legs carried her forward, fueled by both fear and trust. Every step reminded her of that day on Ryloth, every instinct telling her that he would not fail. They reached the control room, and Elias immediately accessed the terminal. Security cameras flickered to life, showing mercenaries advancing through the station. His fingers moved rapidly over the interface, sealing bulkheads, rerouting power, and activating defense drones. Ashelin watched, fascinated and awed. She had heard stories of human ingenuity, but witnessing it firsthand was different. Exhilarating. Almost magical. "Can you handle the comms?" Elias asked, glancing at her. "Yes," she replied. She stepped forward, her hands moving over the holographic console. Her years as a diplomat had given her a knowledge of complex systems, but she had never hacked into a station's defense grid before. Yet guided by his calm voice, she managed to access internal communications, warning staff and coordinating evacuation routes. The defense drones activated with a hum, zipping through the corridors and slowing the mercenaries' advance. The humans and Velari stationed on the station rallied, inspired by Elias's leadership. The tide began to turn. Amid the chaos, Ashelin realized she needed to tell him. She could not keep silent any longer. "Colonel Ward," she called over the commotion, I was the child on Ryloth, the one you saved." Elias froze mid-command, his eyes widening beneath the visor. "You what?" he whispered, more to himself than her. "I survived," she said, stepping closer as the drones engaged the intruders. "Because of you. You saved me." For a moment the world seemed to slow. The sirens, the alarms, the blaring of plasma cannons all faded into the background. His mind raced, memories of a burning city, a small violet-scaled child clinging to his arm, rushing back after years of being buried. "You," he said finally, voice low and trembling. You made it, I did," she said softly, meeting his eyes. "Because of you." The revelation seemed to strengthen him. He nodded once resolutely and turned back to the controls. "All right, let's finish this." Together, with renewed determination, they worked side by side, Elias's military expertise and Ashalan's strategic knowledge complemented each other perfectly. Doors sealed, escape routes secured, and the rogue mercenaries were gradually pushed back. Finally, the leader of the intruders, realizing defeat was imminent, attempted a last desperate move, detonating a plasma charge near the main reactor. Elias reacted without hesitation, grabbing Ashalan and diving behind a reinforced wall just as the blast erupted. The shockwave rattled their bodies, but they were unharmed. The station's shields had held, thanks to quick thinking and precise actions. As the dust settled, silence fell over the control room. Red warning lights dimmed, and the hum of machinery returned to normal. Staff cautiously emerged from safe zones, checking for injuries and casualties. Ashalan stood, brushing herself off, and looked at Elias. "You saved me again," she said, voice trembling slightly but with a hint of awe. He shook his head, a small, weary smile forming. "I didn't save anyone today. We did this together. You were brave. You stayed calm when most would have panicked." Ashalan felt warmth flood her chest. I've always remembered what you did, how you risked everything for me. I wanted to tell you sooner, but..." She paused, unsure of how to put her years of emotion into words. "You don't have to explain," he said gently. "You survived. That's all that matters, and I never thought I would see you again." They stood in silence, the adrenaline fading but replaced with a quiet understanding. Years of separation, fear, and memory had converged into this moment. Ashalan realized something profound. The man before her was not just a soldier. He was a hero in the purest sense, not because of awards or titles, but because of courage, compassion, and the choice to act when it mattered most. Elias looked at her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of pride, relief, and curiosity. "You've grown strong," he said, "stronger than I ever imagined. And you've changed too," she replied softly. "I thought I had only remembered your heroism, but seeing you again, I see the man behind it, the one who is still brave, still honorable, even after all these years." For the first time since their reunion began, they allowed themselves a small, genuine smile. It was fleeting, but it carried the weight of shared history and unspoken gratitude. Outside, the station continued its work, the galaxy unaware of the quiet reunion that had just occurred within its walls. Two lives once separated by fire, fear, and distance now found themselves connected again, and in that connection there was hope. Hope that humans and Valari could stand together, hope that courage could be remembered and honored, and hope that some bonds, forged in the most desperate of circumstances, could never be broken. As the council reconvened, Elias and Ashalan remained close, speaking in quiet tones, planning next steps and sharing memories. The rogue mercenaries had been defeated, but their partnership had only just begun. Across the stars, a new story was unfolding, one of collaboration, heroism, and the quiet, unshakable power of human courage. The aftermath of the attack left the Virex orbital station quiet and heavy. Smoke still curled from damaged corridors, and the air carried the faint scent of burned metal. Technicians worked through the night, repairing systems and checking life support. The alarms had stopped, but tension still lingered, like the echo of a storm that had passed but not fully gone. Inside the medical bay, Elias Ward sat on the edge of a metal bed, his arm wrapped in a medical bandage that pulsed faintly with blue healing light. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with dried blood and exhaustion. Yet his eyes, those calm gray eyes, were still steady as if nothing could shake them. Across from him, Ashalan stood by the window, looking out at the stars. The view was peaceful, endless darkness sprinkled with light. It was hard to believe that just hours ago they had nearly died. For a long while, neither spoke. The hum of medical drones filled the silence, soft and rhythmic. "You should rest," Elias said finally, his voice low but firm. "You were almost hurt back there." She turned, her violet scales shimmering faintly in the room's glow.
"I could say the same to you," she replied.
"You took the blast for me, again!" He gave a small, tired smile. "Seems I have a habit of doing that." Ashalan moved closer, her gaze softening. "You didn't have to," she said gently. "You're a commander now, not a soldier in the field. You could have stayed behind." Elias looked down at his bandaged arm, flexing it slowly. "That's the problem," he said after a pause. I've spent my whole life giving orders, making decisions, staying behind the front lines. But when it comes to saving someone in danger, I don't think I'll ever stop acting." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "That's who I am." Ashalyn studied him, and for a moment she saw not the hardened soldier but the same human who had carried her through the burning streets of Ryloth. The same calm, fearless man who had faced death with quiet strength. "You know," she said softly, "you changed my life that day." He blinked, surprised. "I did?" "Yes," she said. "When I was a child, I thought courage was something only warriors had. I believed it was about fighting. But that day when you protected me, I saw something different. You weren't fighting to win, you were fighting to save." He looked thoughtful. "I didn't think it made much difference back then. Ryloth was chaos. So many lives were lost. I didn't even know if you made it out." "I did," she said firmly. "And I never forgot." She stepped closer, her voice lowering. "I became an ambassador because of you. I wanted to stop others from losing what I almost lost. I wanted to make peace possible, not through weapons, but through understanding. Every choice I've made since that day was shaped by what you did." Elias's expression softened. He leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "I've done many missions since then, but that day, I thought it was one more failure. I thought everyone I saved would still be lost." Ashalyn shook her head gently. "No, you saved one life, and that life grew into something bigger." She looked out the window again, her reflection glimmering beside the stars. "You saved me, and because of that, you helped save my world." Elias watched her in silence, realizing how heavy those words were. He had never considered that his small act of mercy could ripple so far across time and space. He smiled faintly. "You make it sound like I'm some kind of hero." She turned back to him, her gaze steady. "You are." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Heroes are people who win wars. I just do what I can." "Maybe that's what makes you one," she said simply. Their eyes met, human and Valari, soldier and diplomat, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. The air between them was filled with quiet understanding, the kind that only comes from shared history and unspoken gratitude. Outside the medbay, technicians and diplomats worked tirelessly, preparing for the next session of peace talks. The rogue attack had shaken both factions, but it had also united them in purpose. Humans and Valari had fought side by side, and survived. Later that evening, Ashalyn found Elias in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The glass stretched wide, showing endless darkness sprinkled with light. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture still military perfect even in exhaustion. She approached quietly, her footsteps soft against the metal floor. "You always look at the stars when you think," she said. He smiled faintly without turning. "Old habit. The stars remind me how small everything really is. The wars, the politics, the anger. It all fades when you see how big the universe is." Ashalyn joined him, standing beside him. "My people used to say something similar. We believe the stars are the eyes of those who came before us, watching, guiding." He nodded slowly. "Maybe they're the same stars I looked at back on Ryloth." "Maybe," she whispered. Silence stretched again, but this time it was peaceful. The tension that had once filled the air was gone, replaced by something gentler. After a long pause, Elias spoke quietly. "You said I changed your life, but I think you changed mine too, even if I didn't realize it back then." She looked at him in surprise. "How?" He turned his head, meeting her gaze. "That day on Ryloth, I'd already seen too much loss. I'd stopped believing one life could make a difference. But when I saw you, scared, alone, still fighting to live, it reminded me why I joined the Terran forces in the first place. To protect, to give someone hope even if I couldn't save everyone." He sighed softly. "Maybe that's why I didn't give up. Maybe that's why I kept going all these years." Ashalyn's throat tightened with emotion. "You carried that memory with you all this time?" He smiled faintly. "I didn't realize it until today, but yes, somewhere deep down I think I did." The two of them stood there, two souls from different worlds bound by a shared past. In that quiet space between stars, they found something that neither war nor politics could destroy: respect, gratitude, and an unspoken connection. Ashalyn finally broke the silence. Tomorrow the Peace Council meets again. There will be arguments, pride, and maybe anger, but I want to use what happened today to show them what unity means. You and I, human and Valari, we faced danger together and lived. That should mean something. Elias nodded. It does, more than they'll ever admit. Sometimes one act of courage can speak louder than 1,000 speeches. She smiled. Then maybe we can speak together. Not as ambassador and colonel, but as two people who proved peace can survive fire. Elias looked at her for a moment, then nodded again, this time slower. I'd like that. The following morning, the peace chamber buzzed with energy. Representatives from both sides filled the room, some hopeful, others skeptical. Ashalan stood at the center, her posture straight and composed. Beside her stood Elias, tall and quiet, the embodiment of human strength and calm. When she spoke, her voice carried across the hall. Yesterday, this station was attacked. For a moment, chaos ruled again, just like it once did on Ryloth. But this time, we did not fall apart. Humans and Valari stood together. We fought side by side, not as enemies, but as allies. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Ashalan continued, her tone steady. I was once a child who lost everything to war. A human soldier saved my life that day. He did not ask for reward. He did not ask what species I was. He only acted with courage and kindness. That one act changed everything for me. She turned toward Elias. He met her gaze, silent but strong. Now, years later, she said, I stand here beside that same soldier, as an equal, as a friend, and I believe our two peoples can build something greater than fear. We can build trust. The room was silent for a long moment. Then slowly the counselors began to nod. The tension eased. Words turned to agreement and hands reached across tables. When the session ended, Elias found Ashalan outside the chamber, standing once again under the wide glass dome of the observation deck. She turned as he approached, her smile soft and full of warmth. You did it, he said quietly. No, she replied. We did it, he chuckled softly. You really don't let me take the credit, do you?
Not when it belongs to both of us, she said. They stood together watching the stars.
Somewhere out there, countless worlds waited, some peaceful, some still at war. But in that moment, Ashalan knew that no matter how vast the galaxy was, even the smallest act of courage could light a spark that reached across the stars. Elias looked at her and said softly, You've become everything I hoped you would be. Ashalan smiled. And you're still everything I remembered. The silence that followed was not empty but full of gratitude, peace, and something even deeper that neither dared name. The twin suns of Virex were beginning their slow descent, casting a golden glow across the orbital station. The hum of activity filled the halls, technicians repairing systems, diplomats discussing trade agreements, and soldiers standing watch. The station had survived the attack, and more importantly, the fragile trust between humans and Valari had strengthened. Ashalan walked through the corridors, her violet scales glinting softly in the light. She felt a sense of calm she hadn't known since childhood. The memory of fire and fear on Ryloth had once haunted her dreams, but now it seemed like a distant shadow. What remained was courage, hope, and a bond that had grown stronger than any fear. Ahead she saw him, Colonel Elias Ward, standing at the edge of the observation deck. His silhouette was tall and steady, framed against the glowing stars. She hesitated for a moment, remembering the little girl she had once been, and then stepped forward. You're up early, he said, turning slightly, a faint smile on his face. I couldn't sleep, she admitted. Too much to think about. He nodded, looking out at the stars. I understand. After everything, it's hard to rest, knowing the galaxy is still so big, so unpredictable. Ashalan joined him at the glass window. They stood in silence for a moment, letting the beauty of the stars wash over them. The station's defenses were secure, the rogue mercenaries defeated, and their mission of diplomacy had taken a promising step forward. Yet the real victory, she realized, was not political. It was personal. You know, she said softly, I never thought I'd see you again, not in my wildest dreams. And now, here you are. Elias glanced at her, his gray eyes reflecting both pride and something softer, something rare in a soldier. "I never expected to see you either," he said. "All these years I thought of that day. Often, actually. I wondered what happened to the little girl I saved. I never imagined she'd grow into someone like you." Ashalen smiled, a quiet, confident smile. "I grew because of you. You didn't just save my life. You gave me a reason to hope, a reason to act, and the courage to face the galaxy even when it's dangerous." He looked down, humbled. "I don't know what to say. I just did what I had to do. I never thought it would lead to this." "This," she said, gesturing to the station, the stars beyond, and the calm they shared, "is everything." Their conversation was interrupted by a notification on Elias's wrist console. "All systems secure," he reported. "The Council is ready to finalize the trade and defense agreements. If we want to participate, we should go." Ashalen nodded. Together, they walked to the Council chamber. As they entered, representatives from both sides rose and gave respectful greetings. The air was charged with anticipation. After the attack, many expected the peace talks to collapse, but instead humans and Valari had shown resilience and unity. Ashalen stepped forward. Her voice carried easily across the chamber, clear and strong. "Yesterday, our station was under attack. It reminded us that peace is not guaranteed. But it also reminded us what can happen when we work together. Humans and Valari faced danger side by side. We survived because we trusted each other." She paused, letting the words sink in. Then she turned slightly toward Elias. "I was once a child who lost everything to war. A human soldier saved me. Without question, without hesitation. Today I stand beside that same soldier, as an equal, as a partner. And I tell you this. If we can survive fire together, we can survive anything." A soft murmur spread through the chamber. Eyes that had once been skeptical now glimmered with respect. Hands that had been hesitant reached across tables. Old grudges softened, replaced by recognition of courage, honor, and shared humanity, and shared Valari spirit. Elias spoke next, his voice commanding yet calm. "We often speak of alliances, strategies, and treaties, but true strength comes from acts of courage and trust. Today we saw proof. Let us honor that courage by building a future together, not as separate species, but as allies, friends, and partners." The counselors nodded. Discussions flowed smoothly, agreements were reached, and a historic joint initiative was drafted. Humans and Valari would establish combined patrols in the sector, protect trade routes from pirates, and exchange knowledge and culture freely. After the formalities ended, Ashalen and Elias stepped outside onto the observation deck once more. The suns were setting now, painting the sky in streaks of gold, orange, and violet. The station reflected the light, giving the impression that the stars themselves were watching. "You did it," Elias said quietly, though he didn't need to specify what. "No," she said, smiling at him. "We did it." He chuckled softly. "I guess some things never change. You're still the one giving me credit. And you're still the one who deserves it," she replied. They stood together, shoulder to shoulder, watching the galaxy. Somewhere out there were countless worlds. Some at peace, some still at war. Yet in that vast expanse, two lives had connected across years and light years. One small act of courage had grown into something far greater. "You know," Elias said after a long silence, "when I first met you, I never imagined we'd be standing here today. I thought my part in your life ended the moment I handed you to the rescuers." "You were wrong," Ashalen said softly. "Your part was only beginning. Every decision I made, every step I took, it traces back to you. You gave me a future." He looked at her, his expression reflecting awe and humility. "Then I suppose you gave me something too. You reminded me why I fight, why I continue to serve, and why courage matters more than victory." Ashalin's eyes glimmered. "And now we fight together," she said, Humans and Valari side by side. We'll face the galaxy's challenges as equals, not enemies. For a long moment, they were silent, lost in the quiet beauty of the stars. Then Elias reached out, offering a hand. Ashalen took it without hesitation. Their grip was firm, a silent promise of trust, friendship, and unity that transcended species. This, Elias said, is bigger than either of us. But it started with one small choice. Saving a life, she said. Yes, he replied, smiling. That one small choice can change everything. The suns dipped below the horizon, leaving the station bathed in twilight. Stars sparkled in the void, endless and eternal. And, somewhere among them, two lives, human and Valari, stood together, a living testament to courage, trust, and the quiet power of compassion. As the night deepened, Ashalen turned to Elias one last time. Whatever happens from here, whatever challenges come, remember this moment. The galaxy is vast, but even in darkness, light can shine. Elias nodded, eyes fixed on the stars. I'll remember, and I'll act whenever needed. Just like you did. They stood side by side, watching the infinite expanse, knowing that together they could face anything. Somewhere in the vast galaxy, countless worlds were waiting, some to be explored, some to be saved, and some to be challenged. But for Ashalen and Elias, the future was no longer uncertain. Courage had connected them, heroism had guided them, and a bond forged in fire had become a light that could not be extinguished. And across the stars, humanity's spirit shone brightly, not in weapons or conquest, but in courage, compassion, and the choice to protect life, no matter how small, no matter how fragile. The galaxy had witnessed the reunion of two souls, and in that act it had seen the best of both species. Human determination, Valari wisdom, and the enduring truth that one life, one choice, one act of bravery could ripple across time and space to create something far greater than anyone could imagine. As they left the observation deck hand in hand, Ashalen glanced back at the endless stars. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "You may not remember every battle, Elias Ward, but I will remember every life you touched." Elias squeezed her hand, a quiet smile on his face. "Then let's make sure there are many more lives to touch."